Welcome, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us with all the technical difficulties. This meeting will be recorded, so you can share it with anybody who was not able to get in. And I just want to start by introducing myself. My name's Sierra Redbow. I'm a citizen of the Oglala Lakota Nation, and I'm very happy to see all of your faces, and I'm honored to be your MC for tonight. Today, we will be focusing on the themes family and identity, and we will be hearing from two wonderful speakers. One is author Christine Day, and the other is storyteller Jessica Laxháakúdaoo Dominy. And please feel free, Jessica, to correct me and set the record straight. Part of language revitalization is being humble enough to listen to it again. And please type in any questions at any point into the chat, and our moderator will go through them for the Q&A at the end. This will be a little shorter because of the technical difficulties. This webinar, I've already mentioned that. The webinar is recorded and will be available on our website to watch and share. And I'd also like to give a land acknowledgement. So this is a little different than if we were all in person. So from our homes and the lands our ancestors walked before us, where we all call home and breathe in the life around us. So if we would like to take a moment to just consider where we are in this moment. And all right, so let's get started with our first speaker. This is Christine Day. She's Upper Skagit. She grew up in Seattle, nestled between the sea, the mountains, and the pages of her favorite books, which you can see in the back. They're very color-coded and gorgeous. Her debut novel, I Can Make This Promise, was the best book of the year from Kirkus, School Library Journal, NPR, and the Chicago Public Library, as well as Charlotte Huck Award Honor Book and an American Indian Youth Literature Award Honor Book. Her second novel, The Sea in Winter, arrives on shelves January 5th, 2021, and she's holding it right there for you. Her forthcoming book, She Persisted, Maria Tallchief, is an early reader biography in a new series inspired by Chelsea Clinton's best-selling picture book. Christine lives in the Pacific Northwest with her husband. For more information about Christine and her other works, please visit bychristineday.com. And I'll pass it off to Christine.
All right. Thank you so much, Sierra. Thank you so much to the American Indian Studies Department for having me today. As a former student of the UW and as a graduate of the Native Voices program, it is a sincere honor to be back. And as Sierra mentioned in that great introduction, these are my books. I Can Make This Promise, The Sea in Winter, and I do not have my third book out yet. It comes out in November, but these are both middle grade novels, which means that they are most ideal for readers between the ages of 12, roughly 3rd through 7th graders. And The Sea in Winter, since it came out, has been an Indie Kids Next Pick selection. It received 3-star reviews, and it was also just recently listed on the Indigo Best Books of 2021 so far from the major Canadian retailer, which was really awesome to see. So I'm very grateful for that. And I also contributed to this amazing anthology called Ancestor Approved. This book also just came out in February, and is another, it's a short story and poetry collection intended also for middle grade audiences, meaning readers between grades 3 to 7. And this is a collection that was collaborative between 16 different Native storytellers. And we all basically came together. Cynthia Lightstick-Smith who is of the Muscogee Creek Nation. She was our editor who brought us all together and created this collection of short stories told from the perspective of kids who are all attending the same powwow. And so it has this central event with all these kids from all across North America who have come to attend the Dance for Mother Earth powwow, which is a real powwow that takes place at the University of Michigan. So this short story collection and poetry collection is just incredible. And it was a lot of fun to sort of work together and to bring all these different narratives centered around the same place into the same book. And this is going to be what I will read a little sample for you friends today. My short story in this collection is called What We Know About Glaciers. What we know about glaciers. Here's the thing about having an older sister in college. It isn't nearly as cool as it sounds. And that's coming from someone whose sister used to be the varsity cheerleading captain, the homecoming queen, the president of the Indigenous Peoples Club, and the leader of a canoe family called the Future. Her name is Brooke. She was all these things and more until she left the University of Michigan. Now she lives far away. She can only Skype for 20 minutes at a time, and all she ever talks about is her classes, her exams, and glaciers. That's why recycling isn't enough on its own, Brooke tells our parents. The four of us are seated on the upper bleachers. The intertribal dancing is happening on the gym floor below in vivid, swirling colors. The dancers are all smiling and stomping, straight back in their regalia. Brooke is raising her voice, shouting to be heard over the drums. As a society, we must reduce our carbon emissions. So she isn't specifically talking about glaciers right now, but I promise it's coming. And really, who talks about this stuff at a powwow? No one I know. Not until my sister went from the coolest, sweetest, most beautiful and popular girl in our hometown of La Conner, Washington, to this weird, ice-obsessed person who loves coffee too much. She reaches for the thermos at her feet. It makes me want to scream and tell her, it's 8 p.m. on a Saturday night, Brooke. Why do you need coffee right now? Why? This is her fourth cup today. My parents and I flew in this morning, and she was drinking coffee when she met us at the airport. After we stopped by the hotel, she took us to the local cafe where she spends a lot of time studying. Then we came here just in time for the grand entry. She filled her thermos once while I ate corn sticks for lunch, and then again while our parents chatted with the Pendleton vendors. Wait, does my sister have an actual problem? What exactly does caffeine do to a person? While Brooke continues her rant, I pull my cell phone out of my pocket. This caffeine question seems like the sort of thing Google was invented for. And, oh, increased heart rate? Insomnia? I'm scrolling and scrolling, and I don't like this at all. One paragraph claims the coffee can help to reduce headaches after epidural anesthesia, and I don't know what that is, but I'm pretty sure Brooke doesn't have it. But the rest doesn't sound good. Does my sister have any idea about these effects? Does she have any idea? This is concerning. This is what happens when people move 2,000 miles away from their friends and their family and their everything for no real reason. This is what happens when you're forced to live in a closet-sized dorm room and use communal shower stalls and eat top ramen for dinner every night. Brooke has dark rings under her eyes, acne on her forehead. Her long brown hair isn't as glossy or straight as usual, like she forgot to brush it this morning. Her lips are chapped, and I don't want to be rude, but her breath stinks. I first noticed it when she leaned close to share her program with me, and whoa, what even happened in there? I lower my phone and am about to speak up, but Mom is talking now, and apparently I've missed something. This is excellent news, Brooke. We're so proud of you. Mom pulls her into a big hug. Their woven cedar hats crinkle and tilt on their heads, their brims butting up against each other. Our cedar hats are handmade, traditional. We only wear them at powwows now, but in the old days, our ancestors used cedar for everything. Canoes, longhouses, summer clothes, fishing nets, bentwood boxes, even baby diapers. Imagine stripping the soft inner bark from a cedar tree. and weaving the fibers tight enough so that no pee will come out. Imagine doing all of that instead of just buying diapers from Costco. My ancestors were legendary, honestly. Dad raises his arms, palms raised and palms turned in a traditional Coast gesture. He's murmuring words in the chute seed, but his voice is deep and soft, and I can't hear any of it over the pounding drums. If I had to guess, though, I think he's telling my sister, "You lift us up. You make our hearts happy." Brooke smiles. She presses a hand over her chest. "Thank you. I'm so happy to have your support. I've applied for a scholarship. Hopefully I'll get some kind of assistance." Mom waves her worries away. "Even if you don't get it, we'll make it work. We'll find a way to support you." I frown. What are you guys talking about? Everybody turns toward me, like they just remembered I'm here. Mom says, "Are you listening, Riley? Brooke's going to study abroad in Greenland this summer." "Only for a few weeks," Brooke says in a rush. "Summer semester is shorter than the others." I exhale, relax a little. "You'll be home for the canoe journey, right?" "Well," she adds sheepishly, "nothing is certain yet, but I might spend the rest of my summer here. I'm interested in the local environmental nonprofit. If I get the chance to intern there, I think I should take it." Our parents are beaming and puffed up with pride. I know I should be too. This is my sister, after all. The girl who was voted most likely to succeed in her senior year Hall of Fame. The girl who wasn't popular for being rich or pretty or trendy, but because she is warm and kind and genuinely likable. She is the type of person who deserves everything good that happens to her. A real-life Cinderella, if Cinderella wanted to pursue a double major in environmental science and sociology. She was a hard worker, so it's possible. I want to be happy about this announcement. I swear I do. But when I ask, "What's in Greenland?" it doesn't come out super nice sounding. "A cutting-edge research facility," she says, "with a huge emphasis on local Indigenous leadership. Most of the faculty members come from Greenlandic Inuit societies. I'm going to contribute to an ongoing study under their guidance." "It sounds amazing," Mom gushes. "The perfect fit for you." "What do people study there?" I ask. "Why can't you take summer classes online or something like that?" "Because it wouldn't be the same. If I really want to learn and grow, I need to learn from the best. If I want to make a difference in the world, I need to show up and be present." Wow, what an annoyingly bookish thing to say. "We're going to examine the Greenland ice sheet," she continues. "It's the second largest ice body in the world." Sure enough, there it is, glaciers. Brooke is still talking. She's comparing the size of this glacier in Greenland to the big one in Antarctica. She's explaining the rates at which both are melting. She's saying this is a crisis, that it will somehow impact everybody eventually. My gaze fixes on the drums and dancing. The jingle dresses clink, 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 and the men around the drum circle change their rhythm. Drum, drum, drum. I can feel the music in my sternum. Brooke leans in, breathing on me again. "Riley?" Her voice is gentle, careful. "Are you okay?" My throat feels clogged. If I say something now, there's a good chance it'll either come out mean or I'll start to cry. I don't want either of those things. I don't know what else to do. So I rise shakily to my feet and leave. So that is a small preview of my short story, What We Know About Glaciers, from the collection Ancestor Approved, Intertribal Stories for Kids. And I just want to share my quick note that I shared in the back of the book for the notes and acknowledgements. So, what we know about glaciers. Brooke's lesson about glaciers being, this comes from later in the story, so spoiler, whatever. Brooke's lesson about glaciers being like mothers comes from an ancestral teaching described in Salish blankets, robes of protection and transformation, symbols of wealth, which was published by the University of Nebraska Press and written by Leslie H. Tepper, Chief Janice George, and Willard Joseph, both of whom are from the Squamish Nation, by the way. So this teaching was a tribute to Chief Ian Campbell of the Squamish Nation, who says, "I've heard of our glaciers being referred to as big blankets that are also sacred because the waters that flow from them are like a mother nursing a child." These words were the inspiration behind the short story. And I'd like to dedicate what we know about glaciers to my sister, who is best known as Miss Jen to her preschool students. So yeah, I had a lot of fun um, writing this story, especially because when I was first approached to write it by Cynthia Laxháakúdaoo and to be in this amazing, groundbreaking anthology, I was actually just finishing up my grad school years at the UW. And I think that when she approached me and she was like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be, this collection of short stories set at an intertribal powwow, and it's a powwow that is real and takes place at the University of Michigan." And as she was explaining the concept behind this anthology, I immediately was thinking about how important it is for college kids to remember to take care of themselves and to also maintain some of their relationships with the families and communities that they leave behind as they go to pursue a higher education. Um, that was one thing that I was also really inspired by and wanted to honor with this short story. I was also really struck by the idea of capturing this relationship between two sisters who are sort of at two very different points in their lives. Riley, our protagonist, is only 12 years old, and her older sister is already in college. And so she is going off and starting this new chapter of her life. And it's a hard thing for Riley to really come to terms with because she obviously misses her sister and doesn't want to lose their relationship, even though it's just changing, and that doesn't have to mean that someone is leaving you behind. So anyway, that is my short story from Ancestry Improved. I really encourage everyone to check this out because it is such an amazing collection. And for the sake of keeping things a little bit short, I think that would be it for me. So thank you so much again for having me. And yeah, thank you. I look forward to your questions later on.
Thank you, Christine. I wish I had those kinds of books growing up. I loved listening to your chapter. Also, just for the audience, you can actually, instead of putting your questions in the chat, there's actually a Q&A section. If you click more, you see the option for chat or Q&A. So please direct your questions there. And also, we have 2 surprise announcements. With the generous support from the UW's Department of English, as well as the Banks Center for Educational Justice, we were able to purchase 2 classroom sets of Christine's books, I Can Make This Promise, for students at Kilsada Tlingit Elementary in Marysville School District. We worked with Chelsea Craig, the Tlingit cultural specialist, and a guide who is helping us to get the books to the classrooms for those lucky kids.
It's amazing, thank you. So actually, the opening chapter of I Can Make This Promise is set on the Tlingit Reservation, so that is very special. Thank you so much.
We also have a giveaway book raffle. We have 1 copy of Christine's book, I Can Make This Promise, that you can win right now. All attendees can submit an entry via the chat. If you put your first name, grade, favorite subject in school, or favorite book, as well, if you're not a middle school reader, you can still submit an entry for another young reader in your life. Submit your name, the young reader's name, their age, and if you know it, favorite book or subject in school. The winner will be chosen during the Q&A. And, oh yeah, and after that, I will segue into introducing Jessica. So Jessica Domany's Tlingit name is Laxháakúdaoo. She is of the Raven moiety of the Dishiton clan from the Needlefish House of Angoon, Alaska, and is also an elected official for her tribal government, representing over 5,600 Tlingit and Haida tribal citizens. that have come to reside outside of their ancestral lands in Southeast Alaska. She is honored to currently reside on the ancestral lands of the Puyallup tribe of Indians in what is now known as Sumner, Washington, where she has been sharing her tribal traditional stories with numerous organizations, families, and schools in the greater Western Washington area for over 20 years. So please raise your hands for Jessica.
Achenganish chi she hutduasag. Shikakadaoo. Klinket kenak. Deshi tandachkan. Chukanedi yedi. Irish, English, French. Yodasagan. It is my honor to be here with all of you today. As Sierra had mentioned, I am Tlingit, and it is my honor and my privilege to live on this land that the Coast Salish people have been stewards and caretakers of for generations. The stories that I'm going to share with you today, the first one that I'm going to share with you, it's funny that Christine had mentioned sit or glaciers, because the first story that I planned on sharing this evening is one from my grandfather's people, the Chukanedi. A long time ago, our village in Huna, it was actually located closer to the glaciers, the sit, in what is now known as Gustavus. Gustavus sits at the mouth, at the opening of Glacier Bay National Park. Before there was the national park, this was our homeland of Hunakawu, the people of Huna. And they had their long houses in this place. And it was beautiful. You had mountains, you had a river, you had the sea right there at your feet. You had moose and you had other animals, deers, that were all living in this place. But the bounty that the people had came from the glacier, the sit. And in this village, there once lived a young girl. She and her young sibling always loved running and playing. They could not get enough of running outside, playing outside, like most children do. But as they grew older, the sister, she found herself drawn further and further up the valley, closer and closer to the sit, the glacier. Now, our traditional stories tell us that you don't sing at the front of the glacier. You don't drum at the front of the glacier, because the glacier, it hears you, it listens to you. Well, the young girl, she was taken in by the glacier. She would sit for hours and she would listen to the glacier, and it had its own song that it would sing. And she would spend hours sitting there. Well, one day she started to hum and she started to sing her own song. And she was calling, hiya, 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 calling to it. Her young sibling, her young brother, heard her. "What are you doing?" he said. "You are not supposed to call to it." "Oh, it's just something that they tell us. Can you not hear the beauty of that glacier? Can you not hear the beautiful sounds as it sings out to us?" "Hi, yeah, what are you thinking?" her young brother said to her, and he ran back. He did not want to be anywhere near the glacier. The young girl sat there for a moment longer listening, and she sang out her song, and then something different happened. The sound changed. It was no longer this soft hum, but more like a grind, a crunch. And the young girl's eyes got really big. And she watched the glacier for another moment, And then she noticed that it started to come closer to her while she was watching. She stood up as fast as she could, and she ran back down to her village. She got there and she went back and did her work with the rest of her siblings, and her mother was doing her work and her father was out in the canoe. Her brother later told their mother what had happened. So her mother shut her away in the back of the longhouse. You're not to call to it. You're not to call to it. The young girl was sitting there, and soon she realized how lonely she was. And she started to pick at the side of the longhouse. And she'd created a small hole that she could see up the valley. And in that little hole, she could see the sit. She could see the glacier off in the distance. And she sat there and she's in her own little area, but she could still see. And she sang quietly. Hoocha, 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 she would say. Come on, come on, come on. Next thing the people realize, the grinding that had been way up the valley started to get louder and louder. Soon, the people realized that the grinding was coming from the glacier as it moved its way down the valley, taking large strides as it went. Soon, the roaring and the grinding sound became so deafening that the runners came back and they said that the glacier was moving faster than a dog could run. That's how fast it was moving. The water was being forced out in front of it in large waves. The people were told, grab your things, and put them into the canoes. All of the people were put into the canoes. As much as they could carry was put in there, and they set off into the canoe, except for one woman, the grandmother of that young girl. She turned and she looked at her daughter and she told her daughter, take the children and you go. I am going to stay here. I am going to see what I can do. You can't do anything, mother. Come on. You're going to die if you stay here. If I don't stay here, then we are all going to die. The grandmother turned and she started to walk back up the valley. She got to a high bluff on the hillside just outside of the village, and she put her hands up. Hway, 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 she said. And she started to ask the sit. She asked the sit, the glacier, spare our people, spare our people. If I stay here with you, will you spare our people? She sang a song to it. And as she sang and she put her hands forward, it slowed. But it was still too fast, and the ice slowly came around her. As the people were fleeing out across the strait to their summer camps, they noticed that the glacier stopped just on the other side of where the village had once stood. But now the wall of ice stood there over their traditional lands where they would have their families. And it did not leave for a very long time. The people of Huna were forced across the strait into what we now have as the town and the village of Huna. When the Forest Service came in and they decided that they wanted to make this beautiful location a national park, They didn't think anyone lived there. They saw only the beautiful surroundings. They didn't listen to the people, to the stories or the traditions of those lands. And it took a long time for our people to be able to work with the Forest Service. And in 2017, I believe, they broke ground on a longhouse out there in Gustavus. The longhouse was completed in 2018, and it is the first longhouse to stand on those ancestral lands since the time of the glaciers. Our traditional stories, no matter where they're from, whether they're from my people, the Tlingit and the Haida, to where you're from, each of our traditional stories teach us something. It may teach us lessons that need to be learned, of hard lessons, or they can be fun. Since I've lived here in the Pacific Northwest on the ancestral lands of the Salish people, I've learned of coyote stories, and I've learned of other trickster stories like Spider Woman. And I just think it's beautiful how much our traditional stories still teach us today. And I look forward to the opportunity to hear each of you share your own stories as you grow, as you learn, and never be afraid to look at your own culture and ask questions and to truly try and understand our Indigenous languages again. I am still learning mine. I only know a little bit of my own language. I'm still learning it every day. I still get things wrong, but our traditional stories help me learn. And I hope my story today helped you. Ganesh Chish, Hatye, Ganesh Chish, how
Just thank you so much to everybody also for joining us this evening. I know our program is a little bit different now just because of the technical difficulties, but I'll take your lead, Sierra.
Oh, awesome. Well, we'll begin the Q&A. Also, I just want to say thank you, Jessica. It's so wonderful hearing stories, even when we're all at home. I don't see any questions in the chat as of now. So if you have any questions, please put them in.
And while we're waiting, and we love for all of our friends out there, especially if we have middle school age or high school students that are tuning in, this is a great opportunity to ask questions of our esteemed author and esteemed honored storyteller. I'm just so grateful to both of you for sharing this evening. And I am just, every time you share, Jessica, I'm floored. And just you're you're becoming a stronger storyteller every day, and your words about, you know, really honoring the cultures that we come from and attempting to speak our ancestral languages, even if you're just starting out. You know, the great Vi Hilbert, also Christine, hails from powerful people who made that, you know, the tribal people of this land making that commitment to protect and carry the languages forward, and teach them to the generations ahead. And it's not an easy thing because many of you out there in the audience and on our panel know that our tribal languages, our native languages, were outlawed, and we were punished for speaking them. And it's not like that anymore. There is still, a hurt and a shame there that history is real, but now we have a chance to teach our children and our children's children and not feel, scared or ashamed of that. So just thank you to you both. And I'm wondering, I have a question for you, Christine, and it's really basic. I'm only partway through your book, and I can't wait to read the anthology that you shared with us. But this is a beautiful, beautiful book, and I'm just wondering what the inspiration was for it, and how you began to even write at all.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. So the inspiration for I Can Make This Promise, and for everything I've written and will write, really, comes from a variety of places, but mostly it all starts from me and my personal experiences. Edie's family history is very much inspired by my own. My mother was a pre-Indian Child Welfare Act adoptee, and so I grew up, and she grew up, very disconnected from our Native family and Native culture, and as you were sort of saying, the languages and everything that comes with that. So I really wanted to write a story that was about a contemporary girl, sort of coming to terms with that on her own as a part of her coming of age story. I've always wanted to, ever since I was very young, I've always wanted to write books. And I think I've always been really drawn to writing books specifically for kids and for young people, because I think that they are the most universal stories, is the ones that we share with our younger folks, and that they're also just the most fun. I mostly read kids books and teen books because I just think that they're usually more fun than adult books. So and I love that coming of age arc, and how that's really I feel like a lot of kids' books are inherently hopeful. That's another thing that I'm really drawn to in children's literature, is the fact that as you are growing up, there is still so much of your future to look forward to, and so much for you to learn. And kids are just more receptive to that as narrators and as young people. So yeah, I was just really inspired to write this story, this journey that this girl is going on, coming to terms with how her family's history and how she has grown up disconnected from her own community, and what that means for her. Yeah, coming to terms with that and finding a way forward from that. And yeah, actually, if you also read the author's note at the end of I Can Make This Promise, I reference very specifically a field trip that I went on with the American Indian Studies Department from my days at UW. And so that's another thing too, where that was a really particular moment that I had in my life that I drew a lot of inspiration from, was this field trip that we took to Ed Carrier's house. He's a Suquamish elder and basket weaver, and we went to the historic site of Old Man House and learned about the history there, which was really local to our Duwamish and Suquamish folks in the region, where everyone who lives in Seattle, those are the people that Chief Seattle represented in the Treaty of Point Elliott. And so it was very important to learn all of that as well, and that is exactly why Edie is Duwamish and Suquamish herself. Thank you. It was a great question.
I love it. I love it. That is, just even the first part of the book, it's kind of an odyssey of sorts, and just that journeying towards self and family and culture, and to have Edie's voice come through so bright and direct, and she's very self-actualized even as a young person. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're enjoying it.
Yes, I love it. Love it. I can't wait to read more of your writing. A couple of questions are, how can we hear more from both of you? Where can we find more of your work? Where can we hear more of your stories, Jess? And then Kayla asked, what other ways besides speaking your ancestral languages do you practice tradition on the daily?
Jessica, would you like to start?
So for myself, traditionally on a daily, what I like to do is I'm really big lately in trying to learn how to do weaving. I'm just beginning to learn how to weave with our wools, our textiles. I've worked with cedar and I've done beadwork. I have made regalia for family, but this is the first time I've taken on the challenge of learning how to do raven's tail and chilkat weaving. And this is something that is mind-bogglingly challenging for me, and I love it. I didn't realize how much of my grandmother I would hear as I'm starting to go through and do weaving. She was a school teacher. I didn't know her personally because she passed before I was even alive. But my mom told me she used to weave. And I didn't know that until I started going through and I started weaving. And I would hear these little things in my head. Oh, nope, you got to go back. You got to twist that warp different. It's not right. And I would see it and I'd have to undo a whole line and I'd have to start all over, but then I'd get it right. And I would hear this little voice and I didn't know what it was. And then my mother told me, yeah, because your grandma, she used to weave. She would weave with wool, she'd weave with cedar and spruce root. She would do basket weaving. And I thought that was incredible because I had never heard that. So staying connected through traditional arts has helped me, not only in the language, but reconnecting back into my own personal history and my own personal past. I know not everybody has the opportunity to do those things. I know personally, I didn't have access to my own traditional teachings living and growing up here in the Seattle area away from Southeast Alaska. And even as a child, as I love storytellers, and it was actually Coast Salish storytellers who helped me to understand my love of storytelling. Vi Hilbert being one of them, and Roger Fernandez being another. Two incredible Coast Salish peoples that have done amazing things when it comes to storytelling. But for me, I looked at them and I was just like, wow, they were like rock stars to me, I thought. So, but finding ways to channel back into my own culture through the arts has been my connection.
Awesome, thank you. I have ambitions to learn how to learn Coast Salish weaving someday. That was my sort of my thesis when I graduated from Native Voices. I spoke with and recorded a lot of Coast Salish weavers, including Janice George and Willard Joseph, who their book I referenced in the note and acknowledgement for that short story I read. I actually went up there with Dan Hart, my professor, and we visited them in their house and saw their looms and talked with them about the importance of bringing weaving back into their community. And that was one of the most profound experiences I think I've ever had, was talking with them and talking with some of the other folks who are really bringing these practices back. So for me, I don't really, growing up disconnected and still doing the work of reconnecting and sort of finding my way back to these communities, I think that what I'm going to describe might not be what you would think of as a sort of tradition, but for me, I just think about these things a lot every day with my daughter. She is 6 months old, and for me, when I was carrying her through my pregnancy and as I've been raising her through this pandemic and through everything that has been going on in the world these past several months. It has been a really tumultuous time to bring my first child into the world. But I think that for me, knowing the history that I know and understanding how grateful I am that I was not separated from her in any way, and just the fact that she is in my life, I think has been the most sort of profound thing for me. And you know, a lot of these teachings and a lot of the stories and a lot of the stuff that you, when you reconnect with your Indigenous culture and your community, I think that you learn a lot about how to really take care of yourself in order to take care of others. And which again is something that is sort of central in the short story that I wrote. And I think a lot of these things just come through in anything that I write because I'm constantly trying to think about how we move forward from all of this trauma in our histories, because it is also very personal. It impacts our families very directly, and it has the, but no matter what, we have the opportunity to move forward. As Sarah was saying, that it's not, you know, no one will necessarily stop you. It's not scary the way that it once was when languages were banned. And we have a lot of things to be really grateful for moving forward. And I just try to really just think about how lucky I am to be here with my daughter and to have this opportunity to continue to reconnect as she grows up and as I continue to grow and work on myself.
I think one of the other things that's really important that Christina has touched on is finding ways to connect back, and even connecting with other tribal people, especially for so many of us who might not necessarily be on our own tribal lands. It is finding ways to connect with other tribal people. For myself and other Tlinkits, Haidas, even our Tsimshian families, it's always really important for us to recognize the space that we're in is not always conducive to finding those moments to breathe and be thankful for just that moment of life that you have. I am constantly asking friends, hey, let's go out and let's go harvest, but in a mindful way, not going out and harvesting an area of everything that's there. But I would like to harvest cedar, and I respectfully ask the people that are on that land, would you mind if I harvest a little bit of cedar from your land? Would it be okay if I harvest a little devil's club from the riverbanks near your lands? Reaching out to other tribal communities for permission, a lot like how we ask for permission to come ashore during canoe journeys. It makes a big difference in helping to reestablish those connections with each other, because our peoples would have those connections to each other traditionally. And so I think that that's been one of the ways that I've been able to help my own community, my own little small community here in the greater Seattle, Tacoma area during the pandemic. It's been hard, like all of us, to do this meetings virtually and finding those healthy ways of being able to gather and still have some sort of connection to family and to community is important during this time as well as any time.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dawa, to both of you. Good words in the chat box also from Charlotte. And I'm just going to read a portion. The colonial erasure goes beyond removing Indigenous peoples from our lands, waters, and foods. It was just as much about silencing our voices. And then words of gratitude for University of Washington shout out to you, Deb, for holding this space, for cultivating this space for Indigenous voices to be heard and to be centered and experienced and felt in all the powerful ways. There are so many threads, you know, in what you've both shared, and that's powerful. The glaciers, that there was already a natural connection that wasn't planned, like that's just
No, that was not.
It's just the way we roll, and there's just always those natural you know, spirit ties and those kinship connections. And anytime Native people gather and get to share stories, magic happens. So thank you everybody so much. And if you would share, you know, your website once again, or anywhere where we can find you in virtual space, Jessica, I know that people are going to leave here wanting more of you both.
Yeah. Would you like to go first again, Jessica?
Nope, that's all you. Go.
All right. Okay. Figured I'd ask. So you can find me at bychristineday.com, and that is also my handle on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook is by Christine Day.
Right now, actually reaching out to your Native Ed coordinators in the local area. I work a lot with the different Native Ed coordinators through the different school districts. I don't currently have a website. I don't do a lot of self-promotion. That's not really how I am, who I am. But reaching out to the Native Ed coordinators to contact me if you'd like to have me work with your students, talk with your students, or students if you want to know more about, you know, doing storytelling, learning traditional stories and the importance of them. Because both Christine and I are storytellers, just in different formats. And it is incredible to be able to find a way to put your own voice either on paper or creating a story. Because your story, it matters. Your voice matters. And the more we hear your voice, the stronger we are as people, the stronger we are as Indigenous people, as the people who are on this land first. So for me, I lift my hands to each of you. Ganeshchish, Ichsichan, you are loved, because your voice does matter. Even if it's a struggle, your voice matters. And I love to hear it.
Thank you so much. I really admire both of you and all your work and stories. We're going to finish up by picking for the book raffle. So if Christine, if you could pick a number from between 1 and 6.
All right, let's go for number 4.
Number 4, congratulations, Dawn and Grace. Well, I think that concludes, oh, final announcements, sorry. I just want to thank everyone for coming out and bearing with us through our technical difficulties. This event wouldn't happen without our sponsors. Thank you to the Waffle Intellectual House Academic Programming Committee, the Center for American Indian and Indigenous Studies, the UW Department of American Indian Studies, the Squaxin Island Tribe, the UW Department of English, and the Banks Center for Educational Justice. If you enjoyed this event, consider supporting it and more events like it by donating as a friend of AIS at ais.washington.edu/support-us. Student scholarship, this goes towards student scholarships, public programs like Sacred Breath and more. And lastly, our next event is in November, possibly in person on campus at the Waffle Intellectual House. So I look forward to that, and I hope you guys plan on attending.
Thank you all so much. This has been such a pleasure and a delight. I'm really honored to be here.
I thank you guys so much for your attendance this evening and for your beautiful questions and for your energy. Each and every one of you are absolutely beautiful, and I thank you for being here with all of us this evening.